This is Dave Baker from Forged in Fire, and you've been listening to the Reverend and the Reprobate. And this is why you really shouldn't listen.
One question, not critiquing someone else's work, but is there any movie that you as a passion for making weapons, that some historical movie that you look at and you go, man, I wish I could have been a part of that, because I would have done, I would have made a really awesome spear or whatever weapon.
Yeah. I mean, wow. See, I've got a lot of friends in the stunt industry. You said I was a stuntman earlier. I try to say I'm not a stuntman because I've done stunts. I've worked under stunt contract, but I know guys who light themselves on fire and throw themselves out of windows for a living.
Yeah.
Those guys are stuntmen. Those guys and girls. I know women who can do that exact same thing and make a fight look so intense. That's not what I do. So calling me a stunt person is stretching the truth. So I'll stay away from that. But no, there's a lot of films out there that I think would not have been hurt if they had stuck with more of a historical base. I mean, certain weapons only do certain things. You can't make them do other things. It's like, small swords do not cut ropes. It doesn't happen. I mean, you can sit there and saw at it for a while, but swords don't chop through armor. There's a lot of
what does chop through armor?
What's that?
What does chop through armor?
Oh, war hammers do a really good job. Just the pick on the back of them. Picks, axes, yeah, some of them. Sharp, pointy things with a lot of weight behind them.
So it's like a big, heavy spear or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. There are certainly types that are designed to poke holes in European armor. So I always think that if you try to stay closer to history and reality, you actually wind up with a better story that makes a lot more sense, as opposed to, magically running through people and chopping them down. If you're doing fantasy, great. Throw the magic in. Swords do wonderful things in fantasy movies.
Yes.
Super.
I
but
agree.
If you're trying to tell a historically accurate story, and you've got all your bad guys dressed in chainmail and some guy with a dinky little sword is chopping them all in half, it's just not. It's not.
So best lie has an element of truth.
Never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That's right. Yeah.
So we shouldn't give lightsabers to hoplites. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you were doing, hoplites in space, sure, I'm good. I'm down with that. I mean, I think that's kind of cool. It's just one of those things. It's one of those arguments that we have. We go back and forth with. There's certainly those arguments happen on the show all the time. I mean, the reality of what an Italian longsword is compared to what people think it is. We often have smiths come back with weapons that are 2-3 pounds heavier than what they should be.
So tell us about the process a little bit on that, because you mentioned you got to see museum pieces, but on artifacts where you don't have a museum piece to go off of, you're very measured with your responses, which I really appreciate. So how do you quantify something like that and give those parameters?
Well, the first thing I do is, I'll be sent a picture from production. They say, we're going to do this. And I'll go, let's not do that. And they'll go, no, we're doing this. And we go back and forth with that for a while. Then I'll do as much research as I can. There are a lot of sources out there that will give you weights and measurements on the various weapons. Some things you can sort of extrapolate from. If you get detailed pictures from multiple angles, you can figure out how thick something is based on the length and the size and everything else. But ideally, you get a weight and a measurement off of whatever source you can find, and try to hit multiple sources. So sometimes things are just ridiculous. I mean, you get these weights and you're like, it's impossible.
Right.
That thing's weighs more than a truck lid.
So is that something you provide to the contestants as a weight? Because I noticed on a lot of episodes, 20-pound sword, and it's supposed to be held one-handed.
Yeah. We do give them a suggested weight.
Okay.
It's not a parameter.
Gotcha.
And you know how sticklers we are with the parameters, sending people home all
Oh,
the
right.
time. But we try to limit the parameters to length, and so we get two weapons that are generally the same size. If a smith wants to build something that's 8 pounds, thinking it's going to be stronger and better, well, they've made something that's virtually unusable. So now my hand kind of drifts into. It's again, without seeing them. The first time I picked up a Scottish basket hilt sword, a real one, I was amazed at how light it was. And I had picked up really good replicas, but they were nothing like the real thing. And I mean, my jaw dropped. Everything. I mean, I went home, threw everything I knew out the window, and then tried to recreate that weapon at that weight, at that balance, and everything else. And it was difficult to do, but it was a game changer. And so trying to, when I say recreate historical weapons, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I might not use the same techniques or the same materials, but I'm trying to recreate them as a representation of the original that can be used. You know what I mean?
So how
You can make
how
something
did-
that looks great, but it's a wall hanger. It's not ever going to be used. Making something that is the proper weight, balance, and everything else that feels good in your hand, that's the key.
So that particular weapon, you said you had held the replicas that were much heavier, and then that one you finally got to hold an authentic one, and it was lighter, and you tried to recreate it. What was the special sauce for you that you figured out? Yeah, this feels like the original. Did you? How many?
Wow. There were a bunch of things, especially, like I said, with the Scottish basket hilts. I actually went to Scotland a couple of years ago after having that experience. Went to Scotland to study those weapons. There were so many things that were not. What's that?
That sounds terrible. Going to Scotland to study weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And the Scottish people are so cool, and the museums there are so cool as well.
I would love to go. You've been?
Yeah, I have.
It's like, if you had called yesterday, we would have taken it out of the cabinet for you. I'm like,
Oh man.
I can't wait to get back. I was going to go back this year, and then of course COVID happened, and we as Americans obviously aren't responsible enough to be allowed to travel. So
Yeah.
here we are.
It's sort of ruined.